We got Ben Shivers here, and is that how you pronounce your last name?
It's Shivers, but it don't bother me either way. I've been getting it my whole life, so yeah, you're fine, man.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the program and where you guys are at right now, what you're looking forward to this summer, and kind of how these guys are maintaining some focus during this.
Yeah, so I'm obviously part of the Kentucky Prospects. We're based out of West Kentucky, Paducah specifically. We have age groups from 7U to 16U, mine being the oldest at 16U. So we've got quite a few kids in the community. We also pull some kids from Southern Illinois, West Tennessee. We also have had some kids in the past from the eastern side of the state, as well as Indiana. Right now, I've got players on my 16U team. I've got 3 from West Tennessee, 3 from Illinois, and the rest being from Kentucky. And I've even got 1 from Mississippi. So right now, dealing with this situation as an organization, I think a lot of the organizations around the area have kind of stepped back away from baseball right now, being the right thing to do, just kind of listening to some of the guidelines from the CDC as well as our government. I know every state's a little bit different. Us specifically, Bobby Reif, our president, and a couple of our director of operations, Sean Yarbrough and Tremaine Donald, kind of watched this situation pretty closely, kept an eye on it. And when KHSAA released their statement on the 16th of February saying that we'd like to put in place a dead period for the athletes and obviously the schools being canceled, we went ahead and adhered by that as well. So it's been frustrating, to say the least. I think everybody's kind of in that same boat. I know you guys as tournament affiliates and directors are chomping at the bit to get things going. I think it's a scary time for a lot of people, and I don't want to, undervalue or underestimate, the pandemic that's going on. We need to, be vigilant in that regard and make sure that we're doing our best to, as they say, flatten the curve and take care of things in that end. But it's been scary for a lot of the players, especially the older guys. We've got Tremaine Donald's 14U group, who's a very solid group. I help with that as well as the pitching coordinator. We've got Cole Isom's 15U group. And then, of course, my 16U group. And a lot of those guys are fighting for scholarships, as you well know. You guys are in this business to help promote those kids, to get them to the next level. You've got a coach here joining us. And, I mean, it's a big summer for 16U. We experienced it last year at 15U, and now we were really hoping, and, I mean, we're still kind of praying there and making sure this, kind of passes through. But it's a big deal for quite a few of my guys who are looking at some pretty big-time regional and maybe a couple guys, in the near future as some sort of national exposure. We've got some pretty high-profile players that I want to see out on the circuit, and I feel terrible for them, man. I don't think anybody's in our lifetime has ever been through anything like this. So we're seeing players having seasons taken away from them at the high school level, which is a hard pill to swallow for those guys. If there's any consolation to it with my group, they're mainly sophomores, although I do have, I believe, 4 juniors that are young 16U guys. So they feel like they've been getting robbed a little bit, and they understand the severity of this, and it's definitely a trying time, to say the least. I know the NCAA is kind of working on some things for the collegiate athletes, but I don't really know that there's much to do with the high school kids, because once they graduate, you're not going to be coming back. So it kind of is what it is. And I've tried to talk with my players to the best of my ability, keeping in contact with them via FaceTime. They've been sending me video clips, working out, that kind of stuff. We've made suggestions. But, thankfully, a lot of their high school programs are still able to be in contact with them, just not able to be around them in any fashion. So I know that's a KHSA rule. They've stated that the coaches can't have kind of email or text, I maybe even phone calls. I don't want to step over the boundaries there, but they're allowed to speak with their athletes. And so they've given them some itineraries and things of, hey, throwing programs to do, hitting things to do in that regard. And that's definitely helped kind of ease my burden as a summer ball coach. My job is to get with guys like you and, make sure that we get them in front of the right college coaches and the right scouts and get them out there to, have a chance to play at the next level. So.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a lot lately, and again today in an email I sent out that, like, all this stuff, you just kind of, Landon, got his season cut short right as they're starting for college ball.
Yeah.
I just think back of, your senior year of high school. Like, I mean, for us, we were number 1 in the state and, had big goals. If that just got wiped out before it ever took place, I mean, the seniors in high school, I feel really bad for those guys because I mean, they just got it stolen away, and some of them,
Hmm.
may never play again. But
Yep.
I think summer ball, you've got to think we get this under control by then, and can really get back out there to almost kind of forget and push some of this behind us, and get baseball back going. But I know we've got you guys coming, that 16U national. I think we've got 95 of the 96 teams we'll take at the University of
Hmm.
Louisville, and we want to get through this to the point where we can start focusing on the
Yeah.
exposure side of it and planning all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's kind of taking a backdoor approach here, and trying to figure out how we keep everybody, active and in shape and all that kind of stuff. And if we're able to play June 1, are we going to change our June events to kind of help ease
Mhm.
into that? If these guys have lost their entire season,
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out, from a safety standpoint, do we say, hey, these first couple events in June, nobody's throwing more than 3 innings, or there is a pitch count. Let's kind of ease in, as this is
Yeah.
maybe more of a preseason approach. So those are things, as from the tournament standpoint, like how are we involved with helping this ultimately if these guys do lose an entire high school season, which
Yeah.
from the looks of it is probably going to take place.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's going to be done in time for these guys to get out there, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, Tom. And I know Landon, as a coach yourself, I mean, man, I've got nothing but heartache for you guys. You guys spend all fall. I mean, I was there. I went to Western Oregon University, and I remember fall workouts. I remember winter workouts. I remember prepping for that stuff, and your big bus trips and going places. And you put a lot of time in, man, as a coach, and obviously the players put a lot of time in. Coaches are behind the scenes doing stuff, spending time from their family, their wives, their kids. So I mean, I've got a lot of heartache for you guys going through that, just to get ramped up and get going. And I don't know, you're probably 10, 15 games in and having to shut it down, and it's, those guys are heartbroken, I know. And I know that affects, one of the things I've been talking with my players about, not to be tangential to some of the things we're talking about, but, from the recruiting aspect, that really puts kind of a wrench in things. I've been speaking with some of the local, mid majors around the area, SEMO, SIU, Murray State, all these coaches. And, it's definitely going to be difficult to see how they assess their roster coming back. I know that's a big deal with NCAA granting a year of eligibility to these guys, which I think is the right thing to do, obviously. It's just going to be a little bit it's going to be a little bit confusing for some of these younger players coming up, looking at their scholarship opportunities. I know a lot of the coaches that I've spoke with thus far have been very kind of in a gray area. They're really trying to assess some things too. They're kind of almost in a dead period from what I've heard from them through about the middle of May. They're kind of just telling all of their recruits to hold tight, trying to tell guys, hey, we're not going to go out and lean one direction or the other. We kind of want to gather all the information first and see how things go. So that definitely has a trickle down effect. It has that trickle down effect to what I would consider the biggest recruiting cycle, and that's this year for my guys at 16U. 15U is a big deal. 16U is a huge deal. This is outside of going to, I think, a junior college showcase, which, I went to junior college first. A junior college showcase is a huge recruiting opportunity from the next level, whether it be NAIA all the way up through Division One. Junior college showcases are a big time deal, and so the next step below that for me is a 16U showcase. The end of that 16U summer, you're looking at a lot of guys receiving most of their opportunities, if any, if they're able to, garner some opportunities from a recruiting standpoint. After that, most of the colleges have kind of, in my opinion, or what I've been dealing with, have kind of shut down a lot of their scholarship offers. So the high school kids are more focusing on, those 17U senior guys kind of working their way into junior college ranked, which we push a lot of guys to. I'm a big believer in junior colleges. I think it gives you time to mature. I think it gives you time to grow. I think it gives you time to grow as a person. And we see a lot of leaps and bounds from that. And I know I personally had that too. But the trickle down effect is going to be really interesting in how I and my organization kind of mitigate those talks with some of my players, because we've got a couple guys right now with one guy in particular with a standing offer to Murray State. And, he received that after his freshman year. And, talking with them, they're pretty solid right now and everything, but you never know. I mean, that stuff can, 2 or 3 guys who come back from a coach could change who they recruit because that roster is filled in that area. Or, and Landon, you would know that, I mean, that's talks. I don't even know how you guys go about that. I'm sure it's relentless and you guys are going from one direction to another, trying to figure things out, asking players, and it's tough, man. But I definitely feel for the guys, like you were saying, these seniors in high school have really gotten the brunt of it. And I just don't know if there's anything really to do from a summer ball perspective. I'm a little worried about it. I think you guys, like I've spoken with some perfect game representatives as well in PBR. You guys have all been doing a great job handling it as tournament directors, just kind of taking information day by day, week by week, giving us updates. I make sure I pay attention to my emails a lot more now than I have in the past. I'll just be honest with you. So it's definitely something I've got to stay in touch and relay to my groups of parents. They're very concerned about things. They're already having their high school seasons taken away, and that's tough for them to swallow, that pill that they don't get to see their boys play. And so we're doing anything and everything, which is not much, to be honest with you, but hold tight. But we're doing anything that we can to try to mitigate this in any fashion, to hope that we can, if necessary, back our schedule up a little bit. But one thing that you touched on that I'm glad you touched on was a safety standpoint. This is going to be a really interesting time and transition period for a lot of you guys as tournament directors and for us coaches as well, because coming from a position player standpoint, it's probably not as drastic, but from a pitching standpoint, you're looking at a lot of soft tissue injuries that I think we're going to see a spike in. As much as I hate to say that, I just think you're going to have a lot of kids that don't do enough, and it's not necessarily because they didn't want to. Some of my players have opportunities because they've got a cage in a barn, out on their family's property or something, and they've been blessed with that opportunity. Other guys have a net to throw into. Some guys live so far away that right now, with the shutdown and everything going on and the CDC guidelines, they don't have anybody to play catch with. And so that's an issue, and I mean, I know everybody says, well, find a brick wall, and it's easy to do when you're in a city.
Yeah.
It's not as easy to do when you're on a 250-acre farm and, you got metal silos and everything else. So we're trying to be creative and find ways to help our players. But safety is my biggest issue with these guys. I mean, we sign up to be coaches to obviously get them to the next level, but we want to care for them too. And I know you guys understand that firsthand. And I know that, Landon as a coach, he gets that. And that's something that we've got to make sure that we take into account for these guys, is their inning limitations of what they're coming into, which is probably going to be 0. I mean, we're going to be walking in here with some guys never having thrown more than just a couple bullpens, and other guys that are maybe at a 20-pitch limit, and some guys that are going to say, hey, coach, I had a brother who came back from college and he caught me and I've been able to throw 75-pitch pens. So it's going to definitely factor into some just some hardships on my end as a coach, but those would be things as a tournament director and I think a tournament affiliate that you guys will kind of take into account, and maybe doing some research on stuff might help. And I know you guys have probably already looked at that, but just kind of limiting some pitch counts early on, maybe at least in the first couple tournaments, so these guys get some experience underneath their belts. And
yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea to look at that. I know we've talked about going into August, but I mean, Landon's the pitching guy. I mean, what are you going to do with this? What's your best thought process?
So typically, at least like science shows that every week that you lose, add 2 to it, is basically what it is. So if you literally don't pick up a baseball for 1 month, it's about 4 months before now that's like 75 pitches full go back to where you were before. So that's why, you look at the MLB, look at when's the most Tommy John surgeries. It's always been spring training every single time. It's because they don't do enough. They go there and they're like, all right, I got to throw, 25 pitches. If I don't, if I say my arm hurts, they lose their job. There's little things like that go into it, so we need to, look into those things. That's for sure. Adding pitch counts, that does matter, but it's more based on workload. Workload's everything. So it doesn't really matter if, if you're a PO only, that's okay. But a lot of guys, especially in these travel teams, they're a center fielder, then they're a pitcher, then they're a first baseman, then they're, whatever. So it's the amount of throws that you make in an entire week is what really, really, mandates a lot of these things. So coaches just have to understand, hey, my guy was just playing, pitched 6 innings on the mound. It was 100-something pitches. Probably shouldn't throw him the rest of the weekend for sure, especially early, understanding what's going on. But you probably shouldn't even put him in the outfield right after, because he's one throw away from, really hurting himself. So those little things, definitely, have an effect. That's for sure. But, we'll definitely look into those things. I think those were some, good ideas, Ben, that's for sure.
I'm glad Landon's here with us, because obviously he's a pitching guy. I was a pitcher myself at Western Oregon, played 4 years in indie ball as a pitcher. And my career ended.
Real quick, I found a picture with a sweet
yeah
on here.
yeah. I was wondering if that was going to happen or not. Yeah. So, long story short, I played 4 years in independent baseball, and I was very fortunate enough to get to that level. And I did it as a pitcher. I was a relief guy. So, hearing Landon talk about that stuff is really refreshing, because I think, you got a lot of coaches from a wealth of backgrounds. Some guys were catchers, some guys were position players, some guys were, kind of just high school coaches that came up and joined the summer ball ranks. And so, when I assess things, I always have a pitch counter on me. I always check diligently with my game changer, making sure that we're always every inning same. Hey, what's the number? What do you got? What do you got? At 15U last year, I think I had 2 pitchers on 2 instances go up to 95, 96 pitches, and I will cut them off at that. Most of my pitchers sit anywhere between 65 and 85 pitches at 15U. We'll probably stay right about that for 16U. There's just no reason to go up over that. And this is coming from a guy who, when I was 16U, I was throwing him 130 pitches a game. I mean, I can vividly remember it. There was a bulldog mentality there, but I don't want to roll the dice with any one player's career like I did my own. And back then that was 2004. So man, we're getting older now. So 2004, we did some crazy stuff, and it wasn't quite as bad, and I'm obviously years before that, it was even worse. Pitch counts didn't matter, So like Landon's saying, there's some things that you really have to pay attention to that a lot of these younger players, they just don't know that information yet. And a lot of it is because they just haven't been given that information. So, from that standpoint of making sure our arms are in shape, it's really hard to do. You can go and play a catch, as we all know, and you can play long toss, and you can do your medicine ball programs, and you can do some drive line plyo ball stuff where you're working against a wall, and those things are all very beneficial, and they need to be taken seriously, just like our Jaeger bands and everything else. But there's really no substitute for getting on a mound and being in a game and having those pitch counts, because of the adrenaline factor and the fatigue factor that goes into that stuff. And that's what a lot of people don't account for, is throwing a bullpen, there's no effort really involved, because there's no adrenaline, there's no concern, there's no game being played. So it's a very low intensity, atmosphere. The moment I put a guy into a game, it can change things. A 10-pitch relief appearance in the bottom of the 6th in a pastime national championships in the semifinals could be just as, taxing as a 4-inning performance where the guy throws 45 pitches and has a no-hitter going through. With that's a big thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that adrenaline fatigue and that factor of what's the anxiety level of this game. And so you got to watch players carefully. And while I carry my pitch counter around everywhere I go, and I check with my game changer, like I said, and I have my mandated pitch counts that I adhere to, regardless of whether or not it's a perfect game tournament or pastime or PBR, I always adhere to something. I still watch my players with my eyes. I trust my eyes more than I trust my pitch count. So I know, for example, I've got a big 6'5" Jackson Shoulders, and he's a great asset, and the kid's going to be a big time pitcher. He's going to be a guy that we talk about a lot. I think he's a guy that very easily, whether it's through the junior college route or potentially if he starts bumping in velocity, I think that's a guy that could sneak into an SEC program. I think he's a big deal. And you look at the prototypical size and all that stuff, and it's just great to see. 6'5", 220, you know what I mean? And he's athletic, and he's dunking in basketball and all this great stuff. There's been games where he's been solid all the way through 90 pitches, and I watch him throw, and I'm like, man, this guy's on a roll. And then there was a game at Murray State this fall. He got to 65 pitches, and I looked at him and I said, you're done. It's just, you got to see these guys and their mechanics and the way that they're the way that they're laboring or the way that they're cruising. And I know Landon would, really, really probably agree with that as well. Is you can just see things in guys. And that's what scares me sometimes about, the high school level, just to be honest with you. And I respect all those coaches, man. They're giving their time and they're doing great things and they're doing the best that they can. But sometimes, those coaches aren't quite as experienced as guys like myself or you or Landon. And so that's something that I really pride myself on, is making sure that we're taking care of our players to the best of our abilities. And then from there, it's on them, because unfortunately, I can't be around them all the time. I've got guys, like I said, from 3 or 4 hours away sometimes. And so we're relying on them to take care of themselves, and we're relying on them to do what they're supposed to be doing. And I know, Landon, when you send guys home, you're expecting them to follow the detailed program that you guys give them. And when they come back, you're going to kind of test them on that. Make sure, hey, you're supposed to gain 6 pounds of body weight, or you're supposed to drop 10, or you're supposed to, what's your arm, in shape, like, because we're going to put you on the radar gun and see where you're at in an early season bullpen. Those are things that we want to check on, because they're yellow flags and red flags as indicators. Has this guy been putting in work? Is this guy getting better? Is he progressing, or is he falling behind? And so those are things you got to assess in this situation. And right now, it's going to be difficult to do that coming out of a no high school season. I mean, this is uncharted territory for a lot of us. So it's going to be really difficult to kind of figure that out. But I know you guys will do your best, and I know you guys will put the research and time in, and we'll all kind of put our heads together. And coaches, some may argue, but I think at the end of the day, it's your guys' call. And, we're excited for your event. I hope it stands. I mean, my players are geared up for it. We're ready to play in all of our events, but that's a big one for us, being in state and really representing the state of Kentucky well. I know I've got a lot of kids that are just pretty excited to be a part of that one in general.
Yeah, before we let you go on that let's assume we are playing this summer and everything's going, even if that means, hey, we can't start till mid-June or whatever it is. But let's say we are going Wednesday, 16U Nationals. How are you setting up your rotation and your guys for an event like that, where there's 100 teams and, we've got the University of Louisville and all those guys there, and you've got to work through 4 pool play games, get out of that, and then play another 3 or 4 games to get to the finals and all that stuff?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So last year we I'll preface it by saying this. Last year we ran into some early summer trouble, because we took some teams for granted that were obviously a little bit lesser competition than us. And we were still building our identity, and we're still going to continue to do that, of who we are as the Kentucky Prospects, especially the 16U Shivers Club, myself. And, like I said, we took a little bit of those teams for granted, and that kind of came back to bite us. We started saving guys, and it wasn't by my trade to do that, but just looking at the talent that we had, I said, okay, I'm going to try to save this guy for this game, and we'll kind of use this guy to get through this game. And what we found out was we just didn't really respond well to that. And so moving forward, we ended up doing our best when we got later in the summer. We went down to the WWBA. And as you guys know, it's a huge event. It's, arguably the largest event in terms of teams in the country. And we did very well. We beat Bandito's scout team, who finished number 9 in the country. And we ended up advancing out of our pool. We lost in the first round, but it was a great accomplishment to get out of your pool in a 7-game pool and advance through to the top. I think it was 46 teams or something like that. So moving forward into this summer, answering that question is we developed the basis and the idea of, hey, we're going to treat everybody like they're the number 1 team in the country. And I really adhere to that. And my guys responded well to that. So I'm not going to go saving any particular pitcher and say, hey, look, we're going to try to make sure that Jackson Shoulders or Will Norwood or any of these other pitchers that we have are fresh for Saturday, Sunday. Like, in my belief, you got to get there. We'll worry about that later. So what I will do is I will look at the collection of teams that were matched up against in pool play, and I will decide who the best fit is for that. And, as a pitching guy, I have a pretty good basis as well as a good network of other coaches who know some of these teams if I don't particularly know them well myself. And so I will look at that and say, hey, we're going to play KBC Prime. Okay, well, KBC Prime out of, Lexington is coached by Sean Coughlin, and Sean and I played together in pro ball. And so we're good buddies. And, arguably we're the 2 best teams in the state. And so knowing that, I'm going to throw one of my best guys at him. if not my best dude. You know what I mean? It's going to be a top two pitcher. And so we'll worry about the rest when the chips fall where they fall. But at the end of the day, we're not a Canes national. We're not a U.S. elite. I don't have 7 POs. You know what I mean? And I know it's nothing against those guys. We actually had 2 players who were invited off of our team after 14U season to join U.S. elite. So we've had a wealth of talent come through this program. And what we like to do and what I preach is, you know, we're going to build these guys from the ground up and put a fence in our backyard. And we're going to take the best talent we can get from here. And then we'll recruit a couple guys from outside the state and we'll do what we can. But we've got about 14, 15 players right now. Most of them are two-way. And we watch that closely. But I'm going to put our best foot forward with the best teams in pool play to make sure that we advance. You know, and doing the best that we can to advance. If we save anything and we lose and we don't advance, it doesn't do me any good as a coach, and it doesn't do our players any good because I'm keeping them from staying on Saturday and Sunday, which that's where the colleges are going to be. And I think Landon would attest to that. I mean, they're going to show up at a couple games where they know some key players, but they want to see who's standing on the weekend. And you know, moving forward, I'm just going to say, hey, look, guys, like we did last year, every team we play is #1 team in the country. So we're just going to treat them as such, and we'll move forward. And we're going to use our big guys like Jackson Shoulders and Will Norwood and Brady Armstrong and some of these big-time pitchers that we have coming up through the ranks, and we're going to use those guys first. And we've got some talent on the back end of things to take care of stuff as, you know, if we got a spot start Drew Davis or Luke Gilbert or any of these other guys that I've got, Zion LeGrone, I can put those guys in that role, and I know what I'm going to get from them moving forward.
Yep. Well, cool, man. I appreciate you coming on with us. And I mean, hopefully we get some clarity here as we get through the next 30 days. And you got to think we're going to be playing at some point. So hopefully they get this thing cleared up and we can get back out there. But these guys are, you know, I know they're all ready to go because I get emails from players and parents throughout the day and some text messages and stuff. So, I mean, I hope hope we can get to that point and we'll get back out there for sure.
Oh, absolutely, man. We're looking forward to it. We're going to keep preparing like we got the opportunity to play, man, and we'll wait for you guys to talk to us, and we'll do our part on it and hope that everybody does theirs. And, man, we look forward to seeing you guys come this summer, especially July 1st through the 5th. Okay?
All right, man. We'll see you guys later.
Good, man.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you, Landon.